All right, welcome back, everyone. So in our last discussion, we really landed on a huge conclusion from Aquinas' proofs for God's existence. We established this idea of a first mover, a being of what he calls pure act. And remember, that just means a being with zero unfulfilled potential. Today, we're going to build directly on that. We're going to take that one conclusion and see what else it logically forces us to accept about this being. We're shifting gears from asking that God is to asking what God is.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to follow Aquinas' chain of reasoning step by step. We'll start with that idea of the first mover, show how that leads directly to the idea that God is unchangeable or immutable. Then we'll tackle some of the obvious objections to that, and from there, we'll see how being unchangeable has this massive consequence. It means God must be eternal. It's a really elegant logical climb.
Okay, so we always have to start with our foundation, which is what we've already worked through. The 5 proofs for God's existence. And it is so crucial to remember, for Aquinas, this isn't just a matter of faith. He sees this as a rigorous, almost scientific investigation, a metaphysical deep dive into the nature of the first cause of everything we see.
And that leads us right to the heart of the matter today. The 5 ways get us to the existence of a first cause, but really, that's just a starting line. The real work of this metaphysical science, as Aquinas would call it, is to apply some serious logic to that conclusion. If God really is pure act, what else can reason alone tell us about his nature? What is this being actually like?
Now, Aquinas has a specific game plan for this. He argues that before we can say what God is, we first have to figure out what he is not. This method is sometimes called the via negativa, the way of negation or removal. The thinking goes like this. Since God is totally different from the created world we experience, our best and surest path to knowing him is to just start stripping away all the limitations we see in created things. Limitations like change, being made of parts, or having potential. We start to understand God by seeing how he's different from everything else.
And so the very first massive step in this way of negation is deducing God's immutability, his complete and utter unchangeability. This attribute is maybe the biggest dividing line between the creator and the entire created world.
Okay, here's the argument, laid out in 3 clean steps. First, step 1, we have to define what change even is. Any change, any kind at all, is a movement from what something could be, its potentiality, to what it is, its actuality. Think of a cup of cold coffee. It has the potential to be hot. When you microwave it, you actualize that potential. Simple enough, right? Now, step 2, we go back to our starting premise. God is pure actuality. By definition, there is no unactualized potential in God. He's not waiting to become anything. If he were, something else would have to actualize it, and then he wouldn't be the first mover. So you see where this is going. Step 3 is the inevitable conclusion. If change is just actualizing a potential, and God has zero potential, well then God cannot change. He is immutable. It's a really tight argument.
And for Aquinas, this isn't just some abstract philosophical game. He sees this conclusion as something powerfully backed up by divine revelation. Passages like this one from the book of Malachi are, for him, scriptural proof of a truth that our own reason can figure out all by itself. Of course, this idea of a completely unchangeable God immediately brings up some really good questions, especially when you think about how God is described in the Bible. And Aquinas, being a good philosopher, sees these coming and addresses them head-on.
This is probably the #1 objection. You read scripture and you see stories of God getting angry or approaching people or pulling away. How can a being that interacts with our changing world be itself unchanging? It seems like a contradiction.
Aquinas' answer really gets to the core of how we use language. He says we absolutely have to distinguish between what's literally true about God and what's said metaphorically, so our human minds can even begin to grasp it. All of our language is built on our experience in a changing, temporal world. So when we try to use it to describe an unchanging, timeless God, it's always going to be an analogy, not a literal description.
And to make this crystal clear, he uses this fantastic analogy of the sun. Think about it. We might say, the sun came into my room this morning. But did the sun actually move? Of course not. The change happened in the room, which went from being dark to being illuminated. Aquinas argues our relationship with God is a lot like that. God's goodness is like the sun, constant and unchanging. We are the ones who change. We turn towards or away from that constant, unchanging goodness. The change is always in us, the creature, never in the creator.
Aquinas is also really careful to point out that this kind of absolute, total immutability belongs to God and God alone.
Everything else that has been created, from angels all the way down to rocks, is changeable in at least one super fundamental way. It depends on God's will to even exist. Since God brought them into being from nothing, they always have the potential for non-existence. And that is the most basic form of changeability you can have.
So let's push on to the next link in the chain. Because as we're about to see, this conclusion that God is unchangeable has a direct and frankly mind-bending consequence for how we understand God's relationship with time.
First, we have to get really clear on the philosophical definition of time here. For Aristotle and for Aquinas, time is not some empty container that things happen in. Time is the measure of motion, the measure of change. It's how we count a before and an after in any sequence. So it follows, pretty logically, that if there were absolutely no change, there would be no time.
And the logic just flows in a perfect parallel here. Just like time is the way we measure a thing that moves, eternity is the mode of existence for a thing that is immutable. If a being has zero change, its existence can't be measured by time. It has to exist in a state we call eternity, completely outside our sequence of past, present, and future.
So what does it actually mean to be eternal? Well, first, it does not mean living for a really long time. That would just be an endless series of moments, which is just more time. No, eternity is something in a completely different category.
This little chart does a great job of showing the contrast. Our experience of time is all about succession. One moment flows into the next. There's a before and an after. Our present now is this razor-thin edge between a past that's gone forever and a future that isn't here yet. Eternity, on the other hand, is a simultaneous whole. There is no before or after. All of life is possessed completely, all at once, in one single, all-encompassing now.
This is the classic definition from the philosopher Boethius, and Aquinas adopts it because it is just so precise. Honestly, every single word in this definition is doing some heavy lifting. It's one of those definitions you can really sit with and think about.
So let's just break it down. First, simultaneously whole. That means no sequence, no past that's gone, no future that's coming. It's all just there. Second, perfect possession. This is so different from our now, which is so fleeting we can't even hold on to it. In eternity, life is possessed completely, totally, without any loss. And finally, interminable life. This means a life that doesn't start and doesn't stop. It just is.
All right, let's wrap this up by just taking a step back and looking at the path we've just walked. We started with something we can all see, the fact that things in the world move, and through a series of really strict logical deductions, we've arrived at this incredibly profound conclusion about the very nature of God's existence.
This is the rational journey we've taken. Starting from that premise of God as pure act, which we got from the 5 ways, we deduced immutability. And from immutability, we were forced to deduce eternity. Each step follows from the one before it. This, right here, is the scientific method of metaphysics in action.
And all of this leaves us with a final and frankly massive question that's going to set us up perfectly for our next session. If God's existence is a single, timeless now that is present to every single moment of our timeline, past, present, and future, what does that imply for things like divine foreknowledge, for providence, and for the whole puzzle of human free will? We will start to unpack that next time.